Hi everyone, I'm Airier, and today we're looking at Bricky, the next part of every single Warhammer 40k faction explained part 2. This is going to be when he goes through all the Xenos, and I'm not in any way going to be salty whenever a certain any faction, maybe Drukhari, come up that I have had some experiences with as a regular Marine player who has definitely never looked at an entire army to strength 5 shooting with AP3 that could do 2 damage flat on their basic troop that ever did that. I'm talking about the Tau. 9th edition had some pretty bullshit things, and it was I'm going to have opinions about this one. More importantly, you guys know the deal. There's a link below to the original video. Hit it up. Let's get started.
Hey all, this is part 2 in a 2-part series on the Warhammer races. If you haven't seen part 1
That was
yet,
all the human factions.
You can check that out in the description, and I highly recommend you watch that.
I wonder if he's going to update to get the new factions in.
If you already have, go ahead.
Maybe that'd be kind of cool.
Keep on watching. So after an entire episode
of
nothing
chaos?
but humans,
I guess that would be
we can now talk about
Not really.
chaos.
Oh,
which
never mind. We're doing
involves
chaos
again, but a little bit less. We also got demons and shit.
I just felt someone grab my ass.
What?
Like hard, Nick.
So as I mentioned many
Okay, 1, he chose the most buff legs possible. 2, what was that from? You know what? I'm pretty sure it's probably something I shouldn't mention on YouTube. I don't know why, but I have the distinct impression it's definitely from a source that I shouldn't name, if anything.
many times before, we've
Especially
discussed
considering what the tail looks
warp,
like.
the immaterium, the hellish landscape, the purgatory dimension realm.
I mean,
between
if the
material
mouth's everywhere,
realm
don't
of
say
our
it.
Existence. Now, in the warp, it's terrifying, horrible. There are demons everywhere. Things are crazy. All your minds and thoughts and emotions get projected there. It is both formless and empty. It is vast and tiny. It obeys the laws of time and physics while simultaneously does absolutely nothing of the sort.
This is a bit of an aside, but I'm kind of wondering, considering it's basically Cthulhu realm, I've heard very few people ever describe it as non-Euclidean, which is a completely stupid description because Euclidean is just geometry. So non-Euclidean is not that crazy. It's just, I think, different types of shapes. But it's been canonized in most of the Cthulhu mythos as being things that break your mind. And that's exactly why I'm surprised we don't really get that description in 40k, considering 40k, which historically has borrowed a lot of content from Disney and other places that Disney later came to own. They never took anything from Cthulhu, such as just describing things that are supposed to crazily break your brain as non-Euclidean. I don't think I've ever read that description, and I've been racking my brain the entire time, and I don't think I can think of it. In any official media, in any source, or even just fan fiction that people kept throwing together. That's just never been a description that came up. It's a weird thing to point out, but it's such a go-to pop culture description that most people get at this point that even if the words don't actually mean what people think they mean, they get the meaning behind it because it's been used wrong so long enough that it has become right.
Is a hodgepodge and culmination
English
of
major
just
issues.
unknowable, eldritch, horrifying shit. And there are 4 gods that permeate in chaos.
Yeah.
And the book. These are the 4 major chaos gods. And if we wish to learn about chaos, we need to learn about each and every
So is he
single
going to
one
each
of these
individual
chaos
god as well?
gods. First up, we have Khorne, and he is the easiest. Khorne is your
Or
classic
blood skulls.
Satan. He is all about anger, murder, fighting, blood.
Is he? Honestly, I mean, yeah, the fire everywhere, but fire's not his thing. He just is kind of red. It's not really brimstone. I guess classic demon look is him. Yeah. It's like, I get where he's going with that, but Khorne's aesthetic is very specifically blood, skulls, and murder. That a lot of the fire, brimstone, and cackling just doesn't kind of fit him. Granted, his base units are very stereotypical demons, as you would think of for most, I guess, monotheistic religions.
Guts, death. You ever heard the term blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull
I've heard it
throne?
so many times
That's
lately, even
Khorne.
outside of this
the
fandom.
whole idea is that he is all about the fury and strength of battle. He doesn't care where blood comes from, so long as blood is flowing. He wants to fight and murder and carnage and slaughter and death, 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 death.
Yeah.
That is Khorne. Very simple to understand. Next up, you have Tzeentch, and Tzeentch is the god of change. However, the god of change, it's permeates in so many different other ways. He's the most eldritch of all the demon gods. He has this weird way to always be plucking at the strings of...
That That is a very loaded phrase, saying that Tzeentch is the most eldritch. Maybe I'm missaying that, but maybe it's American as opposed to British. Wait, I thought Bricky was American. Whatever. Honestly, I would go more Nurgle just because of the inherent corruption that he represents. But Tzeentch also does that. I know where he's going because Tzeentch is, I have plans within plans within plans. But Eldritch is usually, we don't have a plan. We exist, and our very existence breaks something from having sensible rationality. Which is kind of Tzeentch's thing, because insanity and lack of thought is kind of not his thing. Honestly, now that I think about it, none of the Chaos Gods really do the mindless aspect. It's usually very purposefully stupid and horrible, but not mindless. That's what Chaos Spawns are kind of for, and they're exceptionally a punishment. You know what? I think I'm going to disagree with Bricky in a way that I didn't think I was going to. It's not that Tzeentch is the most eldritch. It's that none of the Chaos Gods, for how chaotic they are really eldritch abominations. They're abominations, but they don't feel eldritch. They feel very ordered in their very specific brand of insanity. They don't usually branch out from it into ways that don't make sense. In other franchises such as Eldrazi and Magic the Gathering, or I was going to say lawyers in reality, but that's a little too on the, accuracy. But more importantly, I'm saying the chaos is too orderly because they fit their theme. I know intellectually everything I just said is stupid and wrong, but maybe I'm under caffeinated, but I can't say I'm wrong entirely on this. I'm going to move on because this is starting to hurt my head.
Of the universe. He's always conniving and scheming and doing his best to cause as much little bullshit as he can. Tzeentch is unknowable. Everything that makes
including
sense,
by himself,
he will and won't do. Every future and setting and every type of destiny or fate is all foretold and also changeable. It is set in stone while also completely random.
Yes, what he's saying is completely accurate, with one notable exception. There's an old story about Kairos Fate Weaver. If you've ever seen a bird with two heads that's blue painted and is a demon of Tzeentch in 40k, that's Kairos. He was thrown into a pit and saw everything. Came back old. To give an idea, demons are immortal, amorphous, never-born beings that do not age. And this demon aged. Kairos was thrown in because Tzeentch was like, you know what? I don't want to fuck with this. So he threw a minor part of himself, which was basically what demons are, minor parts of the overall god, into it, and it came back old. It experienced age in a place that age doesn't happen to. So it's batshit insane now. Beyond Chaos's usual batshit insanity. Also, it sees the future. Sometimes. Accurately, debatable. Or if it's lying. Sometimes it's definitely lying. Sometimes it's not. And it has two heads too. So one is definitely lying. Although both could also be lying. You never find out until it fucks you over. Or it's the truth that fucks you over. You can see the theme here. It's going to fuck you over. So, yes. Except for when it's not.
He knows what everything is going to happen, and also that none of it's going to happen. You would ask Tzeentch a question. That question leads to 3 more questions, and those questions lead to the heat death of the universe, which asks 4 answers to those questions. And then he thinks to himself, what are questions even really? And are you even asking the questions? Or
and
are
it
you
turns out to be useless and self-defeating, so chaos.
And other horseshit. Tzeentch is just, I'm gonna fuck with stuff. He is yes and he is no. He is the understanding and he is complexity.
Tzeentch is an internet troll. He's literally the guy at the keyboard typing off his brilliant answer. He doesn't actually care if it's brilliant or not because he knows it'll piss someone off, and that's really the extent of it. I hate how that makes sense. It's not even right, but also it's not wrong either.
He is unknowable, and that's what the God of Change is about.
Including knowing himself.
He likes birds a lot.
Yeah, he really does.
I don't know why.
They're pretty cool monsters.
Next up, we got Papa Nurgle. Papa Nurgle, he loves you for who you are. Probably not. He will murder you just the same. But Papa Nurgle
But he'll
is
enjoy
about
the death
rot,
process.
pestilence, death, and decay. He is
An
the
outward
end
joy.
of everything.
Insane
Him and
joy.
Zeech do not like each other very much because where Zeech represents change and adjustment, Nurgle represents stagnation and death. He is all about miasma
And fucked up
pestilence
rebirth.
and large bloat and pus and
Usually ignoring that
organs
part.
and people just being sedentary sloth. He is the idea that everything will rot and decay and die. Nothing is certain besides decay and death. All of us will end up the same way, and broken down.
God, his art is some of the most disturbing if you really have a good artist doing it. I don't like when they do. He dyed his pan screen. I just noticed that.
Because of that. Because we all end up the same. We all rot, and we all die and wither. That's Nurgle, and he's got a general theme of course, pestilence and
I just want to move through this because his
different
art
kinds of diseases
just freaks me out.
and things of that nature. That's generally Nurgle.
He's going to cover Slaanesh. You know, we're 3 demon gods in. I really should have, thought of that by now. But, oh boy. I'm assuming when we get to that, it'll just be censored because any accurate coverage of Slaanesh. Let's put it this way. If you have save search on, you don't get results.
He's pretty easy to understand as well, and he chunk. Finally, we have the youngest of the Chaos Gods, and that is Slaanesh, also known as the
censored
Prince
himself.
of Pleasure or the God of Unspeakable Excess. Slaanesh is
Too much
generally
sensation.
referred to with sex. But it's not only sex, it's just that's a good avenue if you want to make stuff. Slaanesh is just the idea of the senses of the body being cranked to not just 11, but more like 17. See, we'll discuss Slaanesh a little bit more when we talk about the...
Oh, yeah, coming back to the Odari because they made Slaanesh by murder fucking her into them into existence. Also, for everyone who doesn't know exactly what I'm talking about, that is not a metaphor, that is not a euphemism, that is a legitimate fact of how they made it over hundreds of years, maybe longer, maybe short. I'm not entirely sure the time frame. But yeah, there's a reason you see very few people accurately talk about Slaanesh in detail because YouTube doesn't approve of that, or polite conversations, or honestly, most people, because as soon as you start talking about I really like this part about Slaanesh, it gets really creepy really fast.
The Eldar, because they done fucked up, but
yes,
he's
censoring with his own body.
Is mainly about just
those are exactly what you think they are.
Emotions. And
tumors.
Therefore, sex is generally a large part of it.
Specifically,
however,
being a demon is a tumor in general.
And torture. Lots of pain, torture, but sometimes sexually related or drug related. Lots of drugs. Lots of drugs. Slaanesh gets off on everything. Extremes
Perfection,
in
too
happiness,
much,
extremes
too
in
crazy.
Sadness, extremes in pain and
manic
sadism
depressive are both things they would enjoy.
Masochism, and of
more
course
the
that
manic.
goes along with the sex part of it as well. It's generally referred to with sex because of the
Unless it was
color scheme, very purple, lots of exposed genitalia. A lot of their models have exposed nipples and stuff. And
yeah,
that is
a lot of the old
generally
ones. The new ones they
theme
kind of
go
stopped
for
with
from
it.
the physical side, but it really embodies everything, mainly pain and also the excessive amounts of emotion. So when it comes
to give an idea, when he talks about excess, there is a story in the lore where someone who was a Slaanesh worshipper was gluttonous. They were eating to excess, and they ate, and they ate, and they ate until they became a planetoid or a moon that people lived on, and it couldn't move on their own, but they just kept eating because that is to excess. It is literally becoming so grotesquely obese that you are kept alive by the fact that your grotesque obsession with excessive eating became that. There's also a model that represents it on a much smaller scale, and they're in Plinth on the Age of Sigmar side, which admittedly has a lot more Slaanesh detail now that the god died over there, oddly enough. I don't know the details, but yeah, that's the thing. In 40k, though, Slaanesh honestly hasn't had anything new almost as long as some of the other model ranges, and I don't think they want to because they've got deals now that aren't Disney, but are close enough to Disney, basically Amazon, that they don't want to get into HBO-only territory. I think. I could be wrong. They're trying to say a little family-friendlier than Slaanesh could ever be, because war mindfuckery and whatever the hell Nurgle's pulling up next out of the 2020 files is still usually less, oh my god, get the children out of the room, inducing.
Down to you'll find a
I'm
lot
not even
of them
joking about
have
any of this
things
either.
like spikes or whips or any kind of BDSM style gear
Yep.
because it is unspeakable excess.
Just think about
The
everything you
prince
should
of
never say in
pleasure.
polite company, and that's
Everything
basically
in
the monoline.
excess to the point where it is just sheer frightening. That is Slanesh in a nutshell. A little bit bizarre.
Taking it
and a little
beyond
hard to
enjoyment
describe
and then taking a few
sometimes,
steps further.
But as we talk more about the Dark Eldar layer in this video, you'll understand it far, far better.
Yeah.
And far more than you'd want to. Now, you might be thinking, why would anyone ever want to join
Insanity,
chaos? They all
desperation,
look horrifying, screwed up, and
mindfuckery.
just frightening things.
Depending on
right?
who you're talking about, it could be literal.
The thing is that, of course,
Two different
one,
ways.
your mind is put into the warp and the materium, so you can be easily swayed by chaos demons when they get into your head, especially if you're a psyker.
Also, when they say swayed, while some demons do go for the old-fashioned, hey, you want to do this because people say you shouldn't, a lot of them will go for the good old-fashioned, nom 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 nom, and just eat you. Yeah. One is more insidious, the other is more immediate, because you could meet puppeted either way.
Sometimes regiments of the less mentally strong people, whether they be civilians or, say, low-level guardsmen or conscripts, can be easily swayed by this and become chaos cultists and stuff, and they serve their dark
Mind
gods,
control.
whatever god they
Literally
prefer.
breaking a mind.
However, and this might seem strange, chaos in their own right isn't necessarily evil. See, the warp is...
That is a very debatable point, considering his previous video was everyone is the bad guy and everyone is evil. No. The thing about the warp is, and I'm disagreeing with Bricky completely here, chaos is evil. It has the possibility to be good, but not with how it is right now, because they are literally just something taken to extreme. If you did self-sacrifice because this is good to save someone, then it would be, oh, I need to sacrifice my arm, I need to sacrifice my leg, I will cut out my eyes. I love this. That is the level of, it takes it beyond normal. It can't be good because good doesn't exist to it. It's not amoral or moral, it's just evil because it is doing the most possible. Evil is the most destructive thing they could possibly do, so it is the most intense. So they try and do evil because it's the most. Because good is just a lot harder to pull things off on in a world like this. It's just, no, they are very much evil. I know Bricky's point here. This is a very contentious thing that has been argued ad nauseum in the 40k community. If it sounds like I'm going off right now, yeah, no, I'm actually simplifying this and taking it down a couple dozen notches from what you will actually find on most forums if this is ever brought up, because you will find people arguing about this for a long time. His point, they have good aspects. The real point is they ignore those good aspects because they don't feed its entire power drive of give me more nearly as much. I mean, sure, they'll take it, but they want the crazier stuff and they'll mind fuck you into giving them the crazier stuff. So therefore, inherently evil because it wants the crazier shit, because that's what empowers it to do crazier shit, to get more crazy shit. It's literally like, hey, there's some good aspects of drugs, such as I think morphine helps people who are in pain. The difference is, this isn't morphine to keep people from being in pain during really horrible shit. This is someone going, all the morphine, give it to me. Murder with morphine, I feel nothing. It's a very big difference. This is the difference between a doctor and a junkie. And these are junkies. There is no good here. It's could be, but chooses not to be. That's why it's evil, because it is actually a choice for them. They actively choose not to do the good.
Every manifestation of emotion and being, every soul, every
Also, because they aren't the entirety of the warp either.
Good things. All the different chaos gods have another side to their coin.
He's going to say Khorne is honor. Also, that is a goddamn lie. He's honorable when it suits him, and he's a petty bitch when it doesn't.
Khorne might be death, murder, slaughter, but he's also got this weird sense of survival of the fittest, trial by combat, and honor. Khorne
called it. Yeah, there was a time where they did more of that. GW's lore, especially for Khorne, has very much painted the honor as a superficial vanity that is admittedly one of the points that makes him a lot more cunning than people really give him credit for, because he comes off as brutish, but he does have tactics. And the honor is a good tactic because when he decides to stop being honorable, most people don't realize it. And then they get fucked over. They also don't realize he can be cunning because he's on Tzeentch. And then he can still use tactics. It's one of the reasons they do overlap there. And it makes him a more interesting character, but also at the same time, people just kind of forget that. It bugs me. It really does bug me.
Korn will never lie to you. Korn will never
Yes, he
stab
will.
you in the back. Korn isn't about
Korn hates psychers and said he would never employ a psycher, and then he employed Lorgar, who is a psycher. Your move, man.
conniving and scheming. Korn is about straight up mono, you versus me, get in the ring, we're gonna murder each other hard.
Lorgar. Just going to keep bringing up Lorgar. If you don't know who that is, it's mostly his fault. Not entirely, but most of everything bad is his fault. Korn helped with that. Wasn't entirely him, but he was on board with it. It was betrayal. It was dishonorable. It was backstabbing. Yeah. What he's talking about right now are things they can do. They can take power from. They don't do it, though, because they like the other stuff more.
Right now. It may not
Fucking
be a good
Lorgar.
thing at the end of the day, but it is that other side of the coin. Him and Tzeentch generally don't get along because Tzeentch is that conniving schemer, but he's also about the idea of hope. Where there is change for your predicament.
And this one, I'm going to completely disagree with Bricky about a lot of this stuff when it comes to chaos. Tzeentch employs people who have hope, but his entire thing is he then gives you the same kind of hope as Palpatine giving to Anakin, saying, "Have you heard the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise?" It's bullshit. He's going to give you exactly what you want on your path to damnation. Dangle your hope in front of you until you don't even recognize what you have done has made you so monstrous that if you ever received what you wanted, you would throw it away because it wouldn't matter to you anymore. He dangles hope in front of people, but it's always false hope. You never actually change things for the better. Because if it was getting better, it wouldn't be good enough for him. He likes the betrayal. He likes the backstabber. He is explicitly all the thing Korn is explicitly against. And also he's self-defeating. So sometimes he gives people hope by accident because he defeated himself without realizing, but it was all according to plan. Unfortunately, he was doing two different plans. One where he lost, one where he won, and both are his plan. He just doesn't always prefer one or the other. But this way he always wins, even if he really shouldn't. Basically, if you ever meet someone who could get punched in the face and says, I knew you were going to punch me, I can punch myself harder, and then they punch themselves, that would be Tzeentch.
There's change for your problem, the hope of the galaxy, the ability to bend the world to your will, the idea that your fate is not set in stone,
doing
the
that
reality
correctly.
that you control your own destiny and can control it whenever you want, the changer of ways. That is
Into
Tzeentch.
something
And
worse.
of course, Tzeentch and Nurgle hate each other because while Nurgle does represent stagnation, death, and decay, he also represents finality and ending. The fact that you...
No. This one is just wrong. Nurgle doesn't represent finality. None of Chaos represent finality. They are explicitly parasites that are tumors that, while malignant and cancerous, and describing them as parasites is also accurate, they don't do finality because they want to get more bad shit from people. They will fuck over large portions of everyone. But if they ever actually won and killed off everyone, they would die because their food source would then be gone, which is actually a plot point in the Horus Heresy for an entire division of a group called the Illuminati, I think it was. That it's a stupid cop-out name, honestly, and they're probably trying to get to the point where it's like, oh yeah, the Illuminati on Earth was also part of this the entire time. Except as far as I know, they never got that far, and it maybe as a plot point later they just haven't got to. It feels like a plot line that they kind of dropped the ball on. But more importantly, he's not finality. He is rebirth. It's horrible, surviving, but enduring, and then coming back in an equally demented form because you don't actually realize what you're coming back as is worse than what you had before, and finality would have been better. But he is not finality. It gets better, even though you really aren't, and you're just deluding yourself to think that. He is delusional. That is actually the thing. But finality implies an end to pain. He is convincing yourself you're not in pain. I can't speak to in pain when you are worse. I get the distinct impression Bricky doesn't play Chaos. Could be wrong, but maybe that's changed in the last 3 years. But yeah, not finality. Finality can happen with all of them, but it's not their goal for any of them because they just don't care about it ending. It's why the Emperor is still alive in some form, because they don't really care. They just want him not ending their game. They're all basically toxic gamers who like to just one-up each other, but don't actually want the game to end.
Can be mentally at peace knowing that you will end and how you will end. Fear of the unknown, fear of change is not present with Nurgle. With Nurgle, everything will rot and die, and that
everything will rot and die, and new life will be born from it that will rot faster and die faster and spread the contagion of rot. It's living long enough to come back as something worse, to make it worse for everyone else, but you don't see it as worse because you're literally mind-whammied. It's not... This is just wrong.
That provides that finality, that ability that this is over. We are all the same, and we will all end the same. We know the
Go and disagree with him on this one.
The meaning of life is to live and die and rot. And with that, it brings peace of mind. Slaanesh is a lot more simple. While they are the excess of emotion, they are also the representation of emotion.
I can see his argument here, and I can see this argument being made. The idea that they are excess means they are also lesser forms of it as well, which isn't wrong, but also they're expressly taking power from excess of emotion. If you're moderating it, it ain't them. Part of this could be how you interpret the Chaos Gods. For a long time, what he's saying for Elise Slaanesh wasn't entirely an out-of-favor way to describe her. Him, them, it. Gender of the weak, choice, whatever would inflict the most pain on someone. They can take pleasure and power and excess. They would like to push you to more excess because it gives them more, but they don't usually aim for the, oh, that was a pretty cup of coffee. I like that. I should put a mochaccino in front of me sometime. I'm focusing on coffee a lot right now. I must need caffeine. That's on me. But they're not all emotion right now. They're just the extremely strong ones to the point where they are self-destructive. The entire thing about chaos is they are self-destructive. If they win, they die. Which is literally their entire thing. But there was a previous general conception that a lot of writers were kind of aiming towards, that they were more fundamental forces within the warp that were the warp. And now it almost feels like they're shifting away from that as to the parasite analogy, where the Chaos Gods are abominations within the warp who are polluting the warp, but they are not the entirety of the warp. So while they can, they aren't only. Honestly, it's getting into a fantasy metaphysics that debatably don't matter because the people writing it change their minds and have been replaced by other people who don't agree, but leave things vague enough that it could still be the same, but maybe it's not. So maybe is unfortunately an accurate way to put it here, because it does depend on who's writing it. Plotline, lore, story-wise, what the company wants later, which may or may not be the same. It is weird.
Slaanesh embodies happiness. Slaanesh embodies excitement,
but
and
specifically
joy
too much
and
of it.
Pleasure, not only in the sense of the physical, bam style of pleasure, but also everything else like food and drink and air on your cheek and.
And again, they actually have models representing this, but it's always taken to excess. It's the excess part. They are the prince of excess, the princess of excess, the queen or king of excess. Emotions can be excessive. Perfection can be excessive. Beauty can be excessive, which, admittedly, that's also why I think a lot of people in 40k are just ugly as shit. Admittedly, that was initially because 40k could not sculpt in pewter. And then the initial plastic runs were... They got better. The sculpts now are beautiful. The sculpts before were... They were a thing. I'm going to leave it at that. Just leave it at that.
Sunlight, the feeling, emotion and feeling, all of that is also represented with Slaanesh. So you have to ask, why are they always represented as super evil skulls and spikes on everything and want to murder everybody? I don't really got an answer for you on that one.
Oh, that's pretty easy. It's because they are manifestations of what people think excess looks like. So if they were in a galaxy that for some reason didn't go this is what excess looks like, and fluffy pillows with kittens on them was disturbing and demented and a sign of just going out of your way to be like, what the fuck level is wrong with you? That would be their entire aesthetic instead. It's not that they could be this, it's that in a world like ours, this looks excessive, partially because also it's built on black fantasy. So at the time in the late 80s, I think that's when this was created, this was like, oh dude, it's like Mad Max on steroids, but with more steroids than Mad Max had, because they kind of look like they were starting up already. And all of the Judge Dredd aesthetic, it's all of the crazy, over-the-top metal band, psychedelic, all the crazy things. I keep saying crazy because I mean that in the legitimate break-your-brain sense of what is scary, what is over-the-top, what is body horror, and that is what Chaos represents. This is very much growing out of that black comedy of the over-the-top essence of it. But also just because that's just kind of what they fell into, because that's what the designers originally thought. But that's a meta commentary, not so much an internal commentary. So I'm not entirely sure it's what he's aiming at. I think he's looking for an internal logic as opposed to the external logic. Internally, it's probably just because it is what it is and we just roll with it.
My assumption is that because mentally humans may think worse thoughts, even if we don't act on them, and therefore they're projected in the warp more. That one's a little bit weird. I don't know. This is me spitballing right now.
No, actually, that's completely right. That's actually how that worked. It's hell the Eldar made Slaanesh, except they took a lot more drastic actions. But yeah, no, I mean, hell, he did this 3 years ago, and it has since come up that if people believe something long enough, they make it real. Because there is now a Tau god of goodness made by the humans who thought the greater good was a religion and not a philosophy. Which really makes you wonder what the hell is happening with Big E, that they are still a non-active god, even though they're an active god, and they've had a lot more belief by a lot more people for a lot longer. It's weird. I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens, because there's implications. All of them being it'll probably still be another decade before we find out.
Now, but I don't know. You need a super bad guy. You already got the Imperium of Man. You need somebody to be a little bit worse than them. So
and they are a lot more than
honestly,
a little.
Who cares? I just want to buy like a bird magician.
Oh, hey, Kairos. Yeah, this is the one I was talking about. Admittedly, his model is freaking amazing, man. It's so detailed, but it's distinct enough that you can get a lot of interesting colors on him. If I played Zinch, I would get his model. I just hope it's not resin, because if you know what resin is like, just don't. Just don't. Metal models, I would take over a resin model. A metal model, if it breaks, super glue it. If a resin model breaks, and the dust goes everywhere.
Look at him. So cool. So
Yeah.
combining all this together,
Their models
on
do
the
look awesome.
tabletop, Chaos Demons are generally very melee based. They run in, go really hard.
Yeah.
They have lots of summoning and conjuring, tons.
Also, he probably won't bring this up because he's focused on the 40k side, but the one thing about Chaos Demons, they're also in the companion game Age of Sigmar and Fantasy, now that they're bringing that back. So they technically, as of now, well, they still only work as of now in 2 factions, but whenever they expand the rules of Old World, which is basically Warhammer Fantasy, which is what technically was the original 140k was based on, and Age of Sigmar, which was what Fantasy became after it died, got revamped, and admittedly had better sculpts. If you buy a Chaos Army, you have 3 potentially different games you could play it in. And as far as I know, they're bad in all of them. But they're useful in all of them as well, and honestly, they just look amazing.
Tons of spells, generally a little bit frail, but they have special saves to make them a little bit stronger.
Yep.
You got giant demons and smaller demons. You got
Oh,
hordes of little
Nurgling.
boys and tons of big guys. Demons are as they seem. Demons. Nurgle is slow. Khorne is super scary in melee. You've got Zeech, who are far
Even
more
worse
into
now.
psychers and spellcasting, and then Slaanesh, who is all melee, really, really, really fast but squishy, but in lots of hordes of tons of melee and pain damage, of course. So overall, the demons are a huge part of 40k and a massive threat.
Kinda wish
to
they got
almost
more
every
models just to
single
give more
faction, with
competition
the
as well.
exception of a couple. However, the big part about demons is also transferred into the other 9 Primarchs we didn't talk about, which are the Chaos Space Marines.
Yep. What the hell is that?
So Horus, and all of his boys, all of them in the Primarchs, they have all also become Chaos Boys, and they all have their own special Chaos Legion.
And this came out before the End of the Death. The final books in the Horus Heresies came out, so all of the spoilers for that, well, a lot of them were out 3 years ago. The final few, I'm not even sure how many were out at this point, but there's a significant portion of them that weren't out. So there's a lot of spoilers he wasn't aware of. This is actually kind of a cool little time capsule for that reason, just to see what his idea of what's happening now, because he's probably going to mention it considering he's bringing up Horus right off the bat.
Legions specializing in so many different things, just like the Adeptus Astartes, the Angels of Death, the regular Space Marines.
But
Chaos
slightly
Space
more
Marines are a whole lot different than the regular Space Marines.
up.
They have the same armor, generally the same training and toughness. They just specialize in
Sometimes
different
older.
kinds of things. And also a lot of the Primarchs have ascended into greater is it greater demons? They're demon Primarchs at this point.
I think they're called demon
Gigantic,
princes.
horrifying man-demon hybrids that are pretty awesome.
And then there's
Angron,
Angron, who just got a downgrade.
Cool. But them and their associated legions that they are a part of are all kind of going out there and causing a large ruckus for everyone else. Considering the raw strength and firepower of a legion of Space Marines, imagine that entire legion just converting to chaos and immediately fighting you.
And then you have 9 of
generally
them.
Pretty horifying. There's a lot
And whatever
of
the
them,
hell
so I
the
gotta
Alpha
write
Legion
them
is.
down. But you've got the Emperor's Children with Primarch Fulgrim.
Oh, wow. Bile worked on this one.
Loyal to Slanesh. These people, they are some
It's wearing
messed
skin.
up people. They're just sensory overload. Tons
Yeah.
of drugs, tons of
Noise
torture.
Marine look.
And I think Fulgrim is a demon Primarch right now. And oh god, I am terrified to see what that man looks like.
Admittedly, I think this is one of the art pieces. I'm not sure if it was fan-made or if this is official or not. Because when they had a model in 40k Epic, which is an old disbanded factory line of tiny little figures that were supposed to be played out like 100,000 point armies, but they're small enough you can actually bring them without literally needing an entire truck bed to carry your army. That's not a joke. That you would actually need it. And they had a Fulgrim model that was the shit. They had a Magnus model that was kind of shit. You see where I'm going with this. It was a shit line at the time when their sculpts were not the best. Some models look good. These did not. And that's probably why they haven't actually put him out yet. Although he probably will, just because 40k is slowly just releasing all the Primarchs.
At least on the
I do mean all.
tabletop, because Emperor's Children are not good people. You've got the Iron
Yeah.
Warriors, which are kind of like opposite of the Imperial Fists, with Primarch Perturabo, I believe is his name. They're Chaos Undivided. They just kind of serve chaos in a general aspect instead of
And
choosing
hate
one
it,
of
but
the
also
four.
use
But
it.
The Iron Warriors are big on the siege and fortification, and they're basically entirely against the Imperial Fists and are a major rival. Perturabo, I believe, is also still alive, and I'm also very interested to see what he looks like, because
That is actually something that isn't even clarified now, because him being a demon is confusing. By the end of the Horus Heresy, hell, by the point where he's at right now, the book said he did kind of get tricked into becoming a demon at this point. But, and this is going to be spoilers, so a warning for that. At the very end of the very last book series, I guess there's 3, I'm not sure which book it happened exactly, he did mention, I could go back and kill Horus, but they piss me off so much I don't want to. But I can turn myself into a monsterish machine that could do that. And then they kind of just don't touch on that. So I'm assuming whatever he is in the 40k timeline, it's probably a Titan. That's my personal guess. He's probably made himself a Titan, a Warp Chaos Titan. Handmade, handcrafted, Primarch powered. Sorry, Demon Prince Primarch powered. Is that the case? I don't know. But I kind of hope it is, just because I like giant ass models even if I don't have them, because they look so freaking cool. Yeah, this is on me.
Demon Primarchs are badass. You've got the Night Lords with Primarch Conrad Kurz. Conrad
Debatable
Kurz is
death.
dead, which is good because he's a sick fuck.
Also, this is something aside. For anyone who wants to know more about his lore, he is a sick fuck. Bricky is completely right about that. And he is dead. Maybe. I say maybe because GW is probably going to release a 40k model of him at some point because he'd sell money. I know what I said. I stand by it. He's dead, canonically. He let someone kill him because he saw it happen in a vision. And it has never really been clarified, except for apparently there was like a TV show they kind of put out on one of their extra channels they have to pay for separately from everything else, and I don't really care enough to watch it at. But I fully expect him to come back. Honestly, I expect Horus to come back, and more about that as spoilers.
But the Night Lords are generally about terrorizing people, and
Yeah.
terrorism. They're generally about fear. And
Terror units, even.
Probably so. You've got the World Eaters with Primarch.
Oh, yeah, this came out 3 years ago, and the 8-bound, all of the Chaos World Eaters wasn't out yet. If he's about to say something like, yeah, they don't really have much in the model line, that has been changed, and they are terrifying if you ever decide to play one. You don't realize what they do, and you just decide to start really close to them. And it's like, that's not good. They're a very melee-focused army that is very good at murderizing everything in melee range. And they're fast. They're very fast. And I didn't know that, and I died horribly.
Angron, still alive, also excited to see. Angron,
Yeah, he was awesome.
If you think
Kind of
you've
basic,
known an angry
but really
person,
good.
Angron is the angriest son of a bitch you will ever know. Angron removed
debatable.
parts of his brain that didn't make him angry, so he
I thought they were already removed. Oh, because that's what being a demon would be,
could
making
be
it worse.
angrier. Angron, fucker's mad.
Yeah, the naming scheme for him
with
wasn't
Primarch
unique.
Mortarion, they actually have their own special codex and their own major army on the tabletop.
Because this is back at 8th edition, so they didn't have any of the other ones yet. Because I think, yeah, Tzeentch got a codex as well after this, I think. So this is... Did he make this before the Tzeentch codex came out? I thought they had one. Am I mistaken here? I don't think so.
Mortarion himself is actually one
Yeah.
of the models, and look at him. Look.
I still think Mortarion has a better model than... Well, it's debatable whether he's better or not than Magnus, but his is definitely, absolutely batshit insane, man. Especially when you have a paint job like this that's just really well done. Kind of wish Typhus had a bigger model.
Look at him. It's so cool looking.
It is.
Of course,
It
Nurgle
is.
based, obviously. So very slow, but very tanky. You've got the Word Bearers with Primarch Lorgar. Lorgar is, I believe, still alive. I don't know what's up with him at the current moment, but the Word...
To the best of my knowledge, and this also could be completely wrong because 40k just decides to change things, he's currently a demon prince empowered by all 4 chaos gods. How that works with Myrdods, I don't know. And has his own planets where he does stuff and is being hunted by one of his brothers in the warp. Ravenguard Primarch. Corvus Corax.
Word Bearers
Yeah.
are generally the people who caused all the major problems in the beginning. At least I blame them for it. They're little assholes.
I
You
mean,
have the
they kinda
Black
earned
Legion
it.
With Primarch Horus. Get fucked, nerd. You've got the Alpha Legion with Primarch Alfarius Omegon. Chaos, I think. And then finally, you've got the...
Yeah. Spoiler for that previous one when he says, I think. That is a bigger I think because after all the Horus Heresy came out and there were spoilers involved, some of which were actually interesting, the total result with that is it's still no idea. Yeah, it's weird. Omegon was explicitly at play at most of the Imperium since before it was the Imperium. That's the spoiler. I'm not going to go further because it's weird and I honestly have no idea how it plays together because it's one of those things that will either be covered later or GW is just moving on from the plot line without finishing it. I don't know which one it is.
Thousand Sons with Primarch Magnus the Nerd. Thousand Sons
Yeah.
also have their own book, just like the Death Guard. Magnus is also a tabletop model. He looks super cool, as you can tell, and they're all super heavily Psyker and kind of Egyptian themed. They look pretty neat.
They do.
But
They really do.
overall, with all of these
Not
Chaos Space
my
Marine
favorite, but
factions,
fun to look at.
you can play as a lot of different ones, but the main ones that you can really work at are standard Space Marines, Chaos Space Marines, as well as the Death Guard and Thousand Sons, as they are the most fleshed out, especially on the tabletop at least. See this right here? This is a really good way to describe the Chaos Space Marines. What the thick-headed fools with their broken corpse of an emperor fail to understand is that not only can they never defeat us, but they cannot hide or flee or shield themselves from
This
the
is basically their
triumph
motto
of
to
chaos.
summarize them in
They
a
are
paragraph, yeah.
finite, and we are unbound, undivided. They must not err, or they shall fall to heresy. All who fall join our cause. Every imperial fool who dares to open his eyes is a willing recruit. They strive merely to hold back our fury and might, and it consumes them. Thus, you can see chaos is inevitable. We lurk not only beyond their grasp and at their gates, we lurk within the darkness of their souls, on the tip of their tongues, in their tortured dreams. We are them, but freed from the shackles of ignorance. We are them, grown strong, evolved. We are them, but so much more.
If this doesn't give it away, delusional is a very big part of chaos. I talked about that a lot more with certain other Nurgle, but it's very much for all of them. They all are very delusional. They're all very mentally broken. They're all insane, demon or chaos marine. There are people who are less insane, but they are more delusional because sometimes they convince themselves they're right. And then there's Alexander Kaon, who is apparently basically the OC Please Don't Steal for some of the writers who admittedly are actually good writers. But dear God, man, they've reached Mary Sue levels on some characters. It's to the point where the Ultramarines would look at you going like, dude, the plot armor's too thick. I'm looking at you, Kaon. Not badly written, just, yeah.
As hardcore as that quote is, the saddest part is they're mostly right. Chaos is basically unkillable.
Because he's saying this, I thought that at the time period he's putting this out 3 years ago, the plotline in Age of Sigmar that Slaanesh is caught dead and the Chaos Gods are kind of okay with it because they don't want to deal with them anymore is a thing. Also, there's a great horned rat, which is its own thing and kind of bring up some other crazy demons in its own right. But on the AOS side, when you're dealing more with souls directly, killing off a Chaos God isn't impossible anymore, even though they're not really dead. They're just kind of contained and you can just purge them of souls if you want to steal them for yourself and have made other gods that way, Marathi. But that is not entirely indicative of what's possible in 40k, but also not entirely not indicative because in fantasy, there was so much crossover. There were stories where Caldor Drago, who was mentioned in the last guy, who was part of the Great Knights, was in fantasy as random side stories, and he was out right away. But there are random crossovers like that. Age of Sigmar is more disconnected, but there's also concept crossover. There's a lot of interplay between ideas, and it does feel like Age of Sigmar is the testing ground for what 40k later becomes. So there's also that, but that's more of a meta narrative, not the internal narrative. So maybe they haven't died yet, but also if they found a way to make it interesting, maybe they will. I mean, just because Slaanesh is sort of out of commission doesn't mean their units are. And hell, some of their units are still the most prevalent in getting updates in Age of Sigmar, which they just don't in 40k. Yeah, so everything he's saying now is a very much maybe statement.
You could probably get rid of Space Marines, a decent amount, the Chaos Space Marines that is, but every soul that dies goes to the warp. Every Chaos soul will end up back in the warp. And depending on how hard you killed them, they will come back at some point.
Maybe is, again, very important here because there are other gods. There's the Emperor. How he engages with souls of the dead is debatable. There's the knowledge that sometimes you get to see people who die and they say the Emperor. And when they say in death is the end, you mean they actually get to go to Emperor Heaven, which may or may not just be being eaten by him. I don't know. 40k has alluded to a lot and specifically said nothing particular. So it's a maybe. It's very much a maybe, and they're not clarifying this, and they haven't made any point to do it. In fact, they're trying to actively confuse it, it seems.
Every demon you banish will return.
Unless the Grey Knight does it and they destroy it.
Chaos is unstoppable. The warp is unending. And while
it's also self-defeating, which is how Age of Sigmar came up, because they won. And after a while, they got bored. Because, yeah, that's actually basically the reasoning there. Age of Sigmar is Chaos won. It was horrible. And then they got bored and did off their own thing. Yeah. That's actually how it went down.
Maybe there is at some point some way to stop them somehow. The resources to do so, the requirements to do so, are so far beyond the reaches of man and the other races at the current moment.
I mean, you would almost need a biological plague to sweep across the galaxy to devour all life and maybe just not interact directly with the warp because they have an external mind that is outside of where chaos controls, because they kind of stick to the single galaxy. I mean, you need a devourer, like a great devourer for that. I'm talking about the Tyranids. Yeah, if they succeed, chaos dies. Whether that was intentional on 40k's part, I really doubt it, but they might run with that plot line now. It's hard to say. They kind of are, they kind of aren't. It's one that they kind of hint at with some writers as being the overarching narrative, but then it feels like some other writers just don't follow that plot line. If it sounds like I'm having trouble consolidating some of the various facts, it's because 40k writers sometimes pay less attention to internal narratives than 40k fan fiction writers. 40k is very good at consistency, but also very good at intentionally letting people play loose and hard with certain facts if it's internally consistent to what they think the overall scope at the time it should be for 40k's counter narratives. And I do mean counter narratives because sometimes they do not make sense in context. But also because everything is true and nothing is true, sometimes that's because they're lies. And that's an explicit thing in 40k. We're lying to you, but what's a lie we don't tell you, so you have to figure it out for yourself. Yeah.
That really, it's just an unstoppable force that just keeps on coming, and it's just barely being slowed. Chaos is by far the biggest threat. They are without number.
I mean,
their
maybe.
legions are everywhere, and yeah, they're pretty scary.
Although I'd still think, even though the Tyranids are probably the biggest threat in lore, they're always kind of given the shaft, honestly. Especially when you consider no one really acknowledges the galaxy is surrounded. They're being invaded from all sides, but we're just kind of ignoring that.
So, I promise, we're done with humans now. Let's talk about some Xenos.
So I went off pretty hard on Bricky for a few things he said about chaos that I think are just flat out wrong, but I need to preface what I was saying the entire time about how 40k lies to you. Everything is true and nothing is true means that you don't know exactly how things fit in. So everything he said, as much as I'm taking it as this is wrong, I also need to clarify for that exact reason. It also could be right, but also wrong at the same time, because that is how 40k's narrative has remained somewhat internally consistent over decades of different authors, some who had various levels of ability to actually craft a story, and others who didn't. There's probably a subset of people who just inserted the name Matt Ward when I said that. No, I'm talking about Ian. I'm not going to say the last name. You know. And if you know, you know. And I am so sorry for bringing it up. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done that, and that's on me. Yeah. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to get back to the thing I've been putzing around about all day instead of recording and, being a functioning adult, being obsessed with painting models, because I've been doing this a lot today. Oh, let's see. Oh, actually zoom in. Yeah. Two-toned Space Marines. I have never bought these models in the multiple years they've been out. Finally got some, and I'm basically just trying new painting techniques, and I've been doing that more than actually recording videos. So yeah, I'm cutting this short to go paint again because I'm jonesing to put more ink down and just do it. Is it good? No, I've literally been working on them for only 7 hours. I like painting. I'm not good at painting. There's a very big difference there. Yeah, I got like a shaky painting hand. Makes it easier to actually stir the pot that way, but unintentional. More importantly, all the joking aside, I do like what Bricky's doing. I like that he's getting into it. I like that he's bringing out a lot of these details. And while I don't agree with all of them, for reasons I stated, I'm glad that he's bringing out, because these are points that do exist in the community. This is information that is out there, and frankly, is still way more digestible than any other way to get into it than there really is directly through 40k proper, because they don't make that easy. So I like this. And I'm kind of looking forward to the next part where I get into Eldar, because I'm not tempted to do that. And I don't have a random Grey Knight army behind me that I happened to eBay snipe because I really enjoyed his coverage of Grey Knights. And I'm not tempted to buy Eldar because they're just so completely different from my other armies. Oh, I'm about to have problems, aren't I? Yeah. Also, I just realized that I have a filter on right now. Huh. Guess I never turned the green screen off. Well, that's on me. All the same, see you guys in the next one. Adios.